Hi, Erin Preston. You've already met me. A little bit about my history is I've been involved in charters since 2007. And what happened was I had a child that was about ready to start school in the Jordan district. I wasn't pleased with what I was seeing at the time. And I had a dear friend who had started Channing Hall who suggested it's real easy, start a charter school, no problem. Liar. But I became involved. A charter had just been approved for Providence Hall going into Harriman, Utah, right where I was moving to at the time. And it was an international baccalaureate. And it was exactly what I wanted, so I stalked the board members until they put me on the board. And then the deal we struck was you guys handle all the academic stuff and I'll just handle everything else, not realizing at the time what everything else meant. So that's a little bit of my history. So personal resume, attorney, used to work for the SEC. I've done a lot of things, worked for LexisNexis as a regional manager for them. Ultimately ended up as a board member, board chair for a while, and then in the construction of the elementary, then subsequently the junior high and the high school, I learned quite a bit about construction of schools, and I ended up freelancing and being a building officer for additional schools, so I've got 11 to my name now. And then on the financing side, which you guys don't know you care about yet, but you're going to really care about soon, I've handled the financing and the bonding of most of those, several of those schools, the bonding of all of the Providence Hall schools, including the State Credit Enhancement Bond, which, thanks to UAPCS, is a wonderful alternative to bonding that gets you really low interest rates in a few years, but you plan for now. Okay? So, how many of you are educators? Okay, how many of you have built a building before?
Like our house?
How much is it?
Any part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Just enough not to be totally scared, but still not so much that you know what you're getting into. Okay? This is what we're looking for here. That was a joke. Okay. I grew up in a construction family and have been working on job sites since I was 8. It was irrelevant to starting Providence Hall until we started having problems with our construction and with our developer, at which point they assigned me to be over the construction, mostly because we were looking at suing our developer at the time. And suddenly all that old knowledge kicked in and I'm like, wait, I can figure this out. This isn't so scary. You need to find somebody like that for each of your schools who can start figuring those things out, who can understand the finance, who can understand the contracts, who can understand these things. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough and then I'm going to give you my information. And truly, call me, ask for recommendations. The reason I got into this was because there were abuses. 2006, 2007, 2008 were years where a lot of charter schools were constructed for half as much as they ended up paying for. And so this is me on the high school. That was fun and last project. Can you click down? Most of you know about schools through district schools, and so I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison here. The district schools are very different in that, if I move, is that okay?
Oh yeah, as long as they can see this.
Okay, great. The districts are usually funded through bonds. They purchase their land sometimes decades in advance. They have established obligations to teachers. They have established buckets for different things. And they have established curriculum, all sorts of different things in different buckets that no one person really controls. You can say the superintendent controls them, but they're walking in with so many obligations that they really don't. You guys are in like this fantasy/scary land of starting all of this from scratch. And the joy of that is that you get to make these balances. And so after being involved in starting Providence Hall, I was the board chair for 3.5 years, and then I was the superintendent for 4. And in those roles, I had a chance to do the whole, okay, if we save this money on facilities or facilities financing, I get to pay the teachers this much more, or this much more goes into a 401k, which means I can attract teachers better, or I can, afford the International Baccalaureate program, which had its own costs associated with it. And so once you have been given this great gift of being able to balance those things out, what do you want to cut? You know, you don't want to cut teacher salaries, you don't want to cut on student-teacher ratios. So that's where we go to analyzing this whole project as a means of building the best school that you need for the cheapest price possible, for the sake of putting the money back into the things that you are starting the school for. How many of you in this room are starting a school to build a building?
No. I thought you meant
I'm gonna
like
give you a
how
mulligan
many
on that
are
one.
building a building.
Right,
Sorry.
you're all here because you're building a building, but nobody starts a charter school to build a building. That's not the fun part, it's educating kids. So go ahead and click to the next one if you don't mind. So I'm already gonna get into the financial stuff, please don't go to sleep yet. Points of analysis, cost per square foot. An average district school will be somewhere in the 200 plus range, usually, cost per square foot. Providence Hall High School, which is the last one I did, was 108 a square foot. It's a beautiful school. Go drive by it or look at pictures. I'll send them to you if you want. But you need to keep your cost per square foot low while maximizing what really matters to you. But on a macro level, under 20% for your facilities, under 20% for your facilities, okay? Because otherwise, here's what the bad things that happen. If you are over 20%, when it comes time for you to bond, which is buyback, it's kind of like taking a mortgage out on your building. They won't lend you the money. Or if you're, say, at 24 or 25%, they'll say, well, we'll lend you the money, but it's going to be at 2% points higher, and it's going to be with a longer call date, which means you have to be in this bad bonding for longer. So from the beginning, never allow yourself to go over that 20%. And everything from purchase of land to contracts, all of it has to keep you under that. Now, that's 20% of your revenue, which is based on projections for students. Build yourself in a little wiggle room. I've been lucky to be involved in a lot of full schools. Most are not. Make sure that you have a little wiggle room on the revenue. But ultimately, what you need is 20%. How many students will this facility serve is a big question. So it's not just how many students up front it's going to serve. Do you have long-term plans? Do you plan at some point to go from K6 to a K8 or K8 to a K9 or, you know, like Silly Providence Hall, K6 to K12? What options do you need to leave open for the expansion on an existing building or potential land that you might need for expansion into additional buildings? I lied, 103 a square foot. 147 total cost, including land purchase, finance cost, and excavation and some other things. We were building for an 800 student capacity. 10.4 million, I think, was our total for that building, but it was 800 high school students, so you know you get more money. So anyway, I'm doing math again, I'll stop it. Can you click to the next one? Yeah, click again. Okay, the process of building a school. There are some things that are the same and there are some things that are different. We have the opportunity / difficulty of permitting through the Office of Education. There are two different ways to permit a school, and why this is kind of a in the weeds kind of thing, but I'm telling you about it now because it goes to where you select to build. So what municipality you're going into matters. How are they going to let you through? So in some instances, it's good to have a municipality. Harriman has been great to work with, which is where Providence Hall is. Others have been just not so great. I would say Pleasant Grove might be in that category of not so great to work with. We all have this get out of jail free card, though, of being able to permit our schools through the Office of Education, which is how the districts permit them too. That process, however, is not easy, and it's long, time-consuming. I'm going to tell you up front, 2 months to get a permit after you've begun. After you have architectural plans, after you have a builder, after you have financing, you're still 2 months away from a permit in most cases, just because then you need engineering and some other things. But it's a long process. I usually bring my binder, forgot it tonight, but my binder of my application for my permit is like that on the high school, and with a lot of stamp things. To be able to get your permit, you have to have designed the school, you have to have the same engineers, inspectors, fire marshals sign off on plans. Similar architects and builders for both construction, or for both charter and temporary. One thing that's different that you should know about is constructive use versus permitted use. Going into legal jargon here for a second, but those are terms in the code that constructive use permitting means a municipality gets to know some things, gets to ask some questions, gets to put a building site through a planning process, and they have a timeline for review and such. Permitted use, as it is currently written, subject to changes in this year's legislative session, permitted use basically says a municipality cannot prevent you from going in unless there are safety concerns, widely interpreted as safety concerns for your students. And so if you have a municipality that's pushing back, call me, we can have a chat about what permitted use means they can and can't do. Some municipalities will still try and put you through a planning and zoning process, but you kind of don't have to do much within permitted use. Like I said, safety plan, traffic plan is usually the hardest that they can get on you, because they'll say, we want a traffic plan to be able to understand your safe egress, or your safe to and from. It's about all that they can really ask for. Can you click again? Okay. This gets to the fun part. I'm going to sandwich the fun part in the middle before I get to the really boring, scary things again. But I'm going to show you some pictures. These are all schools that I've built or worked on, and, well, as a building officer, so overseeing construction. And I've learned a lot along the way, so please learn from my mistakes. And start with, what do you want in your building? So how many of you are teachers? Okay. Teachers, again, what do you think of being most important when you're building a school?
Classroom.
Thank you. What else?
Bathrooms with speakers.
You're good. Okay, keep going.
Library, it's a big thing for us, I think,
Libraries for what?
for students
For
to get
resources.
books. Yep.
But they're all online now. So
So I built this big, beautiful library in.
it's empty.
Yeah, it is. But there's not actually that much space for books. And so it looks bigger, but around all of the periphery edges are carrels for student research. And this little guy here is a Wi-Fi connect with a huge amount of capacity for in there. So most of the library is online. Yes, we have books because kids should learn from books. Kids should see books. Kids should hold books. They're not all gone yet, right? And there's a lot of times where it is good to have books. How many of you have used an encyclopedia in the last 10 years?
Other than Wikipedia?
Ding, 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 got it right there. Right, so you don't need some things that are traditional to a library. And a lot of the district schools are still building things with the same plans that they've been using for 10, 20 years. This is your chance to be smarter about that. So what do you want in your library, if you want a library at all? Or do you just want Wi-Fi throughout the school and you want some student commons areas? I like the idea of the library, and this one was built around what you can't really see here, which is a big space where there are two librarians, because librarians who know where to find things online, now that's still a really good resource to have. So can you click to the next one? You need a few areas within a school where students can get together. So grades on your schools. How many of you are K-6? How many of you are high schools? We only have a K-6 in the room. What are you guys?
We're K.
K-8, good, okay. Okay, so,
I'm K-12.
okay. That's the whole, we'll talk security cameras later. But at some point, they want to start socializing, and you want to start letting them off the leash, and they want some places to sit and talk and collaborate if that's part of your academic model. So this is the Providence Hall Commons area where this is them getting ready for homecoming, but where they can put a bunch of tables and the students will sit and eat, they'll sit and talk, they'll be sent out for collaboration. It's nice to have a big room that can be used for a lot of different things. like this. So build at least one of those in and make it pretty, make it a good gathering place. You'll find that you use it quite a bit, but don't build 7 of them. Build 1, maybe 2, and be sure and where you're putting your money. So this is effectively a waste of space under Adams. I want classrooms and bathrooms first. This has neither classrooms or bathrooms unless you loosely interpret commons areas as classrooms. But it is good for a lot of other things, so.
It's not wasted space, I just, we plan.
No, I thought we were gonna throw down on that one later.
I'll let them know later.
Can you click the next? Then put your money where it has the most impact. So, to this school's credit, it has a beautiful facade. So people drive by and it's a beautiful school and, oh, that seems like a good place to send my students. You have some features that are quite nice. You have the rounded windows and such. The question is at what point you stop with the nice things. So, for instance, in a lot of the schools that I've done, I put a lot into the front entry and a stage, maybe a collaboration area similar to what I was showing you. And that's where you put things like the wooden moldings and the alabaster lights, one of which is out in this picture, sorry about that. But you also put things like windows in there, and it's a great way to multi-purpose everything, because those windows, so this is the front entry, this is right before we opened the junior high, this is the front entry, this is a secure vestibule, forces everybody in here, this is the secretary's front office secretary's desk. We have all sorts of cameras on this area. And so we now have a secure entry that looks pretty, so nobody realizes they're going through a secure area. They're just seeing all this beautiful glass and pretty moldings and things like that. So, you know, it's both functional and pretty. That's one of the areas where we put our money. Go ahead. Okay. And outside, I showed you some here. This is the junior high again. Put a lot of money into the columns and the cupola on top, which actually wasn't that expensive, but then put to the next one. That'll be it later, I'll show, yeah, click to that one,
That
if you
one?
don't mind, yeah. So that's the outside of the high school, similar, the junior high is off to the right, but similar here, we have a lovely roof, shiny roof on the top, the columns, the rounded exterior, but when you get right into it, the classrooms are pretty bare bones, which is open to future usage. They're good enough, they're good quality construction rooms, but you're not putting 200 a square foot, you're putting 103 a square foot in there. So, click back up if you don't mind. Okay, one of the schools that I loved working on was Spectrum Academy High School. How many of you guys know what Spectrum Academy is? Okay, it's a school for students with autism. And if you're ever going to start really thinking about how you want to build a school, fill it with students with autism and see what you do then, right? This was a really fun, out-of-the-box thing. So for those who have ever dealt with students with autism, what are some of the issues that they encounter in a building?
There's no way to answer that question.
I'll throw down with you and Adam.
Okay.
Throw me something.
Overstimulation.
Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe limiting colors is a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. One thing that I found is, you know, those tile designs that you sometimes see in a hallway?
Oh, yeah.
There was a student at Providence Hall who would peel them up because they bothered him so much as a student with autism. And so, you know, I was always torn, like, leave the tiles, but I know why you're doing it, but please leave the tiles. Anyway, but this one doesn't have those patterns or designs. It doesn't have color. It also doesn't have fumes. So low VOC, which means it's a different kind of paint. The tiles are glued on with no fume paint because fumes are a trigger to autism. Another thing that I learned that was fun is this lighting. What's wrong with this lighting? Besides the bugs enough, right?
It's loud.
Right, it's fluorescent, so what's wrong with it?
And above.
It doesn't trigger us, it triggers them. And so fluorescent lighting is a trigger for students with autism. And so you can put in, this lighting is actually more expensive than the pretty lighting that I was showing you in the other picture. But this is where you want good lighting, because you don't want students who are subject to triggers.
What's
So,
that called?
I can't remember, but I'll
I
get you
like
the,
the idea of nail fluorescent.
Isn't it
Yeah.
LED maybe?
it's not.
No?
It's not a common type of lighting, that's why I've forgotten the name of it, but I can find it in
Is
the
it
spec
warmer
book.
than it looks in the picture?
No, it's cold.
Oh, it is cold.
It just is. But I can get that for you later. But anyway, this is an example of a classroom.
Jennifer did light.
Is it metal halide?
I bet it.
It was a what?
Is it metal halide?
That actually sounds familiar, but now
Does it
I'm,
take a while to warm up when you turn it on?
yes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Thank you. Okay. That's what it is, what she said. You want to click on the next one? I'll go back to talking about something else here. Athletics and extracurricular. If I had a penny for every time somebody's asked me, are you going to have a football team at the next high school? I'd be rich.
And you could have a high school, a football team at your high school.
You don't want a football team. I love football. My kids play football. Football is great. I don't have money for a football team at a charter high school. The only one that's really running a really good one, I think, is Summit. What? ALA is running one and Summit's running one. But it's really hard, and I don't recommend, even Vernal, I know that they
We
look
could
at
do
the-
soccer, just 2 goals.
Oh, wait,
And a
hold
ball.
on. But wait, there's more. You can do soccer, you can do rugby, you can do lacrosse,
Yes.
you can do.
Anything that's really cheap.
Yeah, but soccer, rugby, lacrosse, you just got three fields out of that field. So,
Yes.
right, and more that they will come up with later, I'm quite sure. Then they use it for PE, they run around on it, they do drills for ROTC, everything needs to be multi-purposed, and that's the exterior facilities as well.
And make sure you have good soil underneath.
Oh, bless your heart, thank you. Okay, we're gonna point out common problems. We're gonna put these in the detail category, but you're gonna really care later. Providence Elementary, where I signed on after the contract was already signed and all that, didn't have much in it. The developer was able to put it in whatever they wanted, and we got very, very, very little topsoil and hydroseed on top of it. Because of the very rocky nature of this soil, they were literally putting seeds on top of rocks in some places. It didn't grow well. So you don't end up with good grass, and then what do you do to fix it? So here, you guys actually had the luxury of sod, but no
The
soil
roots still
underneath
come
it.
through the sod.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, yours is not the worst I've seen. What do you do to fix that?
Start over.
Right. How do you start over?
Cut. Yeah.
Let's live
You gotta
through one
take
nightmare
full
so you
take-
understand why these decisions are so important up front. So, Providence Elementary had bad watering system because they used a pipe that was half the size that they needed to, from what the spec was. I missed it in installation because they installed it over a weekend, so bad on me. But I missed it. They had it underground by the time I came back. And so the entire watering system is wrong. It shoots in wrong directions, everything is off as far as pressure, it doesn't reach some parts of the field. It was done by a residential landscape designer rather than a professional or commercial. So that's one problem. Okay, so first you're ripping up the grass, then you're ripping up the soil, then you're ripping up the landscape pipe. So how much are you into when you've just ripped it up now?
You've just done it
Tons.
twice. You paid.
Right, so you're like $80,000 just to remove everything. Now you put in new pipe and new, well, actually, no, first you have to dig down lower because you have to put in topsoil, which you didn't put in the first time. And so you're now excavating another 8 inches, and excavation costs are spendy. So I think on the high school, it was almost $2 million in excavation costs. So it's, no, that's too high.
That would be.
I'll get you the actual number, but it's crazy expensive on the excavation cost depending on where you're going. We wanted to go into this place with really rocky soil. In some places, they were excavating with dynamite. That's how it went. So do I want to dig down another 8 to 12 inches to put in new topsoil? No. So what exists now at the elementary is the same thing that existed when we first put it in, which is bad watering, big pond in the middle where the drainage isn't right, a lot of areas where there is no grass, and we throw down fertilizer every once in a while, and that's the end of it. It's bad, it all needs to come up, and it was one of those things that, while I was still there, I would just pull my hair out every time I would see it. So it's an example of a mistake to not make. There's a lot more, but that's the ramifications of what you're dealing with when you make those kind of mistakes. This one has 12 inches of topsoil underneath it with sod that was grown from a special seed for athletics fields, so it doesn't get destroyed when kids run and play on it with lacrosse, rugby, and non-football. Anyway, so that's where we put our money, having learned that lesson. Can you click to the next one? Okay, this goes back to what I was talking about before, which is you guys have this opportunity to design things from scratch. And I want you to think about really what it is that you want before you talk to any builder, before you talk to any architect, certainly before you talk to any architect. I'm going to bash architects just a little bit here. Architects are hired to make things beautiful. You are hired to make a school, or you're volunteering excessive amounts of hours to make a school. Do the pluses and minuses yourself. So whenever I would go in as a building officer, which is kind of an independent consultant to a group that was looking to build a school, I would ask them, what are your absolute needs? Classrooms, bathrooms. We'll agree on that one. What are your wants? Big fancy library, but I'd settle for. And then what are your, gee, it'd be really nice if we had football stadium. Okay, so then you take your 20% and you come back to, okay, how do we want this to really work? How do we want this to flow? How does your curriculum model work within this? So quickly, what is your teaching model, teaching or learning model at your schools?
We have blended learning, and so it's kind of like more at the higher end and less at the, and then there's like.
So you have some online?
Yes.
So Wi-Fi hubs?
Yes.
Great,
So
okay.
a lot goes into technology, a lot of our money, we have to do that. And we have open spaces, that are very flexible, convertible. We even have some classrooms with walls that are convertible.
Movable?
Yes. And, which I don't like and I do like, I don't know.
I've built one that has them and I don't like them,
It's
and I do
not,
like them too.
yeah,
So-
it's not the little kids though, it's just the upper kids, so that's a little bit easier. And then, but we did the same thing, like the library is our conference room.
Great.
And I will tell you this, there's like our carpet, we just found out that it was $30,000 extra for the one that the architect wanted, the designer, and we found another one that was perfectly beautiful, was recyclable, was green, was low VOC, and it was $30,000 less. Same exact thing, just a different maker.
And
You know.
$30,000 is half a teacher.
Right.
So every construction decision I made was how much of a teacher's salary is
And
this
that's who I
mistake?
fight with, is the designer, not the developer, it's the designer. And the developer helps run interference, but, it's hard because they get this, they are supposed to make it beautiful and you're paying them to make it beautiful. But I'm like, that's not functional, so that's what we fight about,
Yeah. Yes, you do. Win those fights. So that's why you go in and know what you want before you're talking to an architect. Because find me an architect who's ever been a school teacher.
Right.
I'll put $100 on the table. Find me an architect that's ever been a school teacher. Now, there are some architects who will be more responsive and more understanding and more open to your ideas. And I can give you my plus and minus list of the architects I've used and have gotten to know. But they frequently don't listen. So your model, guys.
We're a data-driven direct instruction school, but we also have ability-based groups, so our building would have to have some kind of breakout rooms or dividable rooms.
I would recommend breakout rooms with the potential for dividable rooms, because the reality on those walls is you don't ever move them.
Right.
So
Too tired.
I've seen a lot of movable walls that never get
But we
moved.
have like glass rooms in our library, like a couple of glass rooms. So you can see the students in there, but they can work in groups, which is nice.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
for just quiet.
Longer conversation another day. Okay. How about you guys?
we're doing a blended learning approach where about half the day they're actually using tablets or some other technology, the other half the day they'll be in learning labs, what we call it, kind of like bigger setting where they're doing more hands-on activities.
Like what?
Just depends on the topic, the subject, but there are lots. I mean, we'll have gardening outside, so obviously we had to consider soil apparently. Hadn't thought of that one before.
Greenhouse, just saying, Utah, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
So,
But I'm gonna push you on this. Now, what kind of learning activities are you?
and that's something that we had to get down into the nitty-gritty to figure out exactly how we need to do that, so,
Okay, so you have the potential to build something really unique or to waste a lot of money.
exactly.
Okay, I say that not knowing you personally, don't take it the wrong way, but science labs, what do you really need in them? Gardening isn't part of the Utah core. So how important is that as compared to other things? Providence Hall's IB is collaborative, a lot of collaborative planning and such, but where does that really go on? Where do the teachers collaborate? Guess what? They collaborate in their classrooms, all those collaboration spaces that we built for teachers to go to. At least we got the whiteboards back, we took it back in the classrooms, but you want to be careful about what you're building for, and the minute that you let go of that baby of a plan, somebody else is going to be telling you what you're using it for.
Like they try to make you get Promethean boards. And I don't need Promethean boards.
No, you don't.
They're obsolete.
Yes, they are.
So, I mean,
Right.
it's like, there's lots of stuff like that. You have to be very careful.
Voice of wisdom here. So,
I have to say, I'm a teacher, they're not obsolete.
they're not
Boards
obsolete?
are obsolete.
Oh.
I thought it was chalkboards.
Well,
and
Oh,
whiteboards
good, now
were
you guys
not.
can have a fight with her instead of me.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at what you're doing with this experiential model, that's an area of great potential or great risk. You guys.
Okay, so we're the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
We're
we're
a
low
slow tech model. We're a Waldorf school, so we are looking at actually
Classical ed,
really nice
No,
chalkboard.
Asthma, just say. Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Chalkboard.
You're like Little House on the Prairie school, but.
No, but so we're actually we do have needs for some level of technology for testing and upper grade students, but we're really primarily
Think real hard
focused
about
on.
the SAGE
Yeah,
testing requirements.
exactly.
Okay.
So we will definitely need something like that, but in terms of like access within all of our classrooms or those types of things, that's not a huge priority
And
for us.
the aesthetic plays a role though.
And then it's a very nature-based
The
curriculum, so
sensory
the
experience.
access to the outdoors, the sense of access from within the classrooms, the outdoors is significant. And then we have lots of specialty sorts of classes, so having good classroom space for those, for music and for art and for science and movement and those sorts of things is important. And the spaces where those things can happen.
Okay, so one of the buildings that I built, which is probably one of the nicer ones that I've been involved with, is Canyon Grove, which is formerly Quell Run. It had some struggles academically. The building itself is built to LEED certification, and as part of that, it's classrooms, views. There's actual numeric requirements on how much window space you need, how much nature you need to be able to see, how to get the kids outside. The low fume thing I learned from them. There's a lot that goes with that that's consistent with your model. Maybe we should talk later. There's a few warnings I would have too.
That'd be great.
Because sometimes, and I'm going to say that to both of these schools, sometimes those models don't play out. So from the pragmatic, okay, I've had to actually educate kids kind of side, what is in the stuff you have to get in kids' brains before they leave? Is gardening something you put in, or is it not? Canyon Grove has had plans for a lovely garden greenhouse. It hasn't gone in because the focus has had to be on academics. And interestingly, so that one struggled academically, no secret there. I came back kind of duty-bound, went on the board, and we changed some things about the academic model. It became about gender-differentiated learning. But suddenly we have a green school that was built to be a green educational environment, and we're doing gender-differentiated learning. We adapted it to it. But it's kind of the perfect example of, okay, but what if we have to change something? And the what if you have to change something and how adaptable is a building goes to the ultimate value of your building on the open market, which helps you get financing and bonding down the line. So don't get too crazy, like no
Can I ask
greenhouse
a
right in the
question
middle.
about that?
Okay, yeah,
Well, we were just talking with someone just the other day about financing and stuff for our building, and one of the things they said to consider, and I just wonder if you've ever worked with a school who's done this, is how easily could you convert the building into something even like office space?
That's what every
No.
developer looks at though, like my developer, they look at that. you
Yeah,
know?
so I'm just wondering if that's something like that you have accounted for in buildings you've worked on, or like how that's implicated those sorts of decisions.
children are a growth industry in Utah. I've never seen a school turned into an office space.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
have
kind of what I,
had.
but I just wondered if you've,
They
ever
just
tried
wanna
to-
cover their investment.
That's
so
the
they
problem.
bring it up a lot.
So for them to, appraised value of a building goes to three things: cost of construction, revenue, so how much money is being generated by the kids who are going there, and basically, what can this be used for in some other way on the open market? And the comparables they always use are office space. And I guess that's not entirely true. I mean, there are some schools that have been turned into office space later. Yeah, I mean, my law firm's in an old mansion that used to be a house. So, you can adapt these things back and forth, but no, I've never seen a school turned back into office space. We'll talk later, okay. They're looking at it from an appraised value kind of way. You just smile and say thank you and go back to planning your school, okay?
Yeah, I just was wondering if you'd ever like had someone try to do it that way.
They don't do that though, they don't say, oh, this couldn't be like a good front office for business office. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they
They
shouldn't.
just say that to
They
Yeah,
shouldn't.
they don't do that.
I will never again say they won't do something,
Yeah.
because in Utah school construction, they will do anything. I get to accumulate fun stories. But push back a little bit, if it's really about them trying to get to a replacement cost, where are you set to go?
Mill Creek.
Okay.
We like challenges.
Yeah, no, it's fine, it's just that it's not likely to be office space, you're likely to have a school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's plenty of office space in that area.
No, that wasn't this was for something else.
End of slideshow.
No, I've got a different one there, just a second. Now we go over to presentation 2 tonight.
You guys thought you were out of this pop. Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. Danny, before you leave, would you like to talk about what you do?
Sure.
You guys are gonna get to know Danny really, really well. In a good way.
Yes.
We like Danny.
And he's a wonderful guy. Danny, do you wanna just come up and just explain who you are, what you do, and what they're required to do?
I'm like at the halfway mark and they're sick of hearing from me. Come on up, Danny.
No.
So,
Exactly.
I wasn't prepared to talk. Seriously, listen. I know, you did. My name's Danny Schoenfeld. I work with the State Charter School Board. My role is to help you and the Charter School Board review financial plans, facilities costs, and everything kind of in between. So I'll be there to kind of help you as you start getting this thing called the MSP allocation. You go, what in the world is that? To facilities costs and kind of everything in between. We'll also be doing, put on your calendar, probably won't be as applicable, but something your business manager will want to do. At April 19th will be the spring finance training, where you will hear about the upcoming legislative changes both for policy and funding. And then we also traditionally have one in the fall as well. And that typically focuses on a little bit more of a variety of subjects, where facilities, benefits, things of that nature. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and we're here as a resource for you as you're kind of going through this, because I know there's a lot of like what ifs and what here, and Aaron's also a very good resource as well.
In your office, will you explain,
And-
you guys have to approve, or
Yeah,
explain now?
So the other part,
I
sorry.
love this part.
Yeah.
No, say it really
Here, come
slowly.
stand in front of this.
Come on
Other
over.
role.
What do you have to approve?
I have to help with the approval of your leases and your contracts, and so that's at least kind of the feedback. So hopefully we can get, I'm starting, in fact, I got 2 today, and we start going through those, and hopefully
reviewing some of those costs and really questioning, because sometimes schools can get into some really good deals and some schools can get into some really financially questionable deals. And so hopefully we're there to help kind of weed out the utility costs and square footage and hopefully lead you in the right direction in kind of that 3 to 5 year term, which is really the critical time that Aaron's probably going to talk about, where the finances were going to set you up to either make you or really put your school in a financial strain.
Yeah, and which you can never recover from. Not to be too dour.
Your contact information's on the USOE.
On the USOE website, I'm chargeable. I don't have any cards yet. For whatever reason, it's still 7 months. I don't have any. But you can find me on the web, and I'm really good with email. So
Resources versus human.
Vistaprint.
Vistaprint, yeah, I might have just to go find free cards.
Yeah, well, maybe you just don't want people calling and then
No,
already
I'm-
giving you cards and then back to the car.
No.
Okay, well.
So anyway.
Great, thank you.
So Danny's a great resource. You guys have opportunities to use a lot of resources that those of us in the early years had to figure things out ourselves. And there's a certain value in figuring things out yourself, sometimes by learning the hard way, and by learning the hard way from each other sometimes. But Danny is going to be a great resource for you in helping balance out things like, what percentage of the revenue should go to facility cost maximum?
20.
Hey, see? I wish somebody had told me that. I really do. Long-term bonding and planning is another thing that he can help you with. Throughout your process, begin with the end in mind. And the end is the cheapest building that you can. And so, you know how I was talking about how you want to pay teachers first, then you want classrooms. What do you want to pay for less than anything? It's a hard question. Money, interest rate. It does you no good, right? And so getting things right in the initial stages, which Danny's going to help with, is huge. One thing that I was loving that he mentioned, and we're going to go over contracts in a minute, but I want to reemphasize right now and then later and then after that, is do not sign a contract until it has been approved by the Office of Education. Do not enter into a contract without RFPing the services that you are trying to secure. This is, don't do something stupid 101. So legally, under procurement code, there's some stuff that I'm going to go over here in a minute, but you are legally bound to submit a contract to the Office of Education prior to entering into any sort of real estate purchase, which includes a lease or development agreement. The reason that that is in place, and the reason I love that that is in place, is because that's the biggest area of potential failure. And Danny was kind enough a few months ago to do a really lousy project that I asked him to look into, and now he knows more than I do about this, which is average real estate costs, cost per square foot, financing costs, other things. So within a contract, you have contract terms, language, out clauses, things like that. And you also have how much should we pay for something. And so Danny is now equipped with, here's the averages that we see, and he can help you with that. That's also something that I've looked at a lot of, and I can help you with those things as well if you want to call, and I can say, 200 a square foot, back up.
Are you familiar with each area?
Of the state,
Do they vary quite a bit depending on,
land cost?
yeah, like Harriman versus Mill Creek?
Yeah, Herman's cheap.
Yeah. So you know those differences then, right?
Yeah, and those are pretty easy to find. That's realtor search kind of things. And you're going to be building on a smaller piece of land than you would in Vernal. Yeah,
And it's way cheaper in Merle too.
yeah, it is. However,
Well, just the land,
there's
not the
pluses
building.
right, well, there's pluses and minuses to different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me walk you through a construction timeline. Construction 102, or whatever we call the next class,
201.
whatever you decide.
And I'll let them know when the next.
Good. We're going to go through a little bit more of your construction timeline. Again, plan in advance, and then execute. But here's what you're dealing with in pre-construction. The selection of your site, and that's where I go to municipalities. Like if you're on the verge of 2 municipalities or 2 areas, which one is likely to be friendlier? Which one is going to have issues or not have issues? This is a fun one. This is where I'm going to cover this here quickly. This is where I go to my second school that I did, which is Excelsior Academy in Erda, Utah. Lovely school, 9.2 million for a 52,000 square foot school. I was still learning on this one, but they had purchased land before I became involved, and everything was perfect with the land. Beautiful view, great dirt, sewer line 5 miles away.
Oh, no.
So you're gonna have a lot of these oh crap moments, right? But thank you. What do we do now? What we did is we built what I think is the largest septic system in the state of Utah, and the grass is really green. But it's one of those things that if they'd asked me beforehand, hey, what are some things we should consider? How close the water are, how close the sewer lines are, those are two really good things to consider. Design, what do you want the school to look like? So Waldorf, you're gonna wanna go traditional, I would assume. The one in Provo area is gonna go maybe a little bit more modern looking. What do you want it to look like? What kind of things do you wanna have in it? Rose Park, you might wanna have, I was going to
We go play
say,
football in Rose Park.
you
But
go
no,
to your-
but there are
Yeah.
security.
well, cultural things. So maybe your colors are a little bit different. Something that makes people want to come there for whoever the people are that you want to attract. So I'm attracted to the Harvard look, and I like that. It gels very well with the International Baccalaureate, so that's what I do on that. But if you want to Google Canyon Grove, it's very modern, it's very green. It's nothing that I would ever build for myself, but it attracts the kinds of people that you want to attract, right? Finance, Danny's your best friend. Contracts, I'll help, and there are others. Permits, that's, again, next. We're gonna cover this a little bit more. This is a big, hard one. Please don't fall asleep on me, it's very important and it's very boring. Construction. As you get into the construction phase, what are you doing to make sure the building is built right? First thing you do is watch everything. So every time, I gave a presentation I should be doing, monitor everything. Show up on construction sites whenever you feel like it, including in the weekends when you can find out that the pipes are half the size they need to be able to have done that. Ask the hard questions, even if you're having that moment of I'm not sure what this answer should be, and I think this might be a stupid question, ask it anyway. A good builder is going to explain things to you up front and help you understand things. A bad builder or developer or whatever is going to find you annoying and quote unquote say, don't worry your pretty little head about it. The number of times I've gotten that in my career, let me tell you. But anytime you hear that, you worry your pretty little head about it. It's now time to worry big time. And so monitoring everything. Become a control freak if you weren't already, although most people who start charter schools really are, so congratulations. And then coordinate, but make sure that you retain ownership of things. What the board wants, what the builders want, and what the architects want, and then what the engineers need, and what the permitting entities need, are all different things. Make sure that the first is your school. And then report back. So just like you're asking for communication from builders and architects, you want to report back everything that you're doing so that there's not questions. If Danny approves a contract, he's going to want to know what's happening with the financing, and did you have overages? Are you only in the 23% range, so that he can warn you prior to you signing on to even greater problems that he could warn you about. So my hardest thing, and this is why I do a lot of free advising on these things. My hardest thing is when somebody comes to me and says, oh, I wish somebody had told me about that. And it's, the 1 cent solution has become a $100 problem now. There are great resources within UAPCS, within the USOE that didn't used to exist. Use them, use them, use them, over-communicate. Just like the child that keeps asking why, you will get the answers and you will become smarter for it. Construction completion, end in mind, certificate of occupancy. Moving punch list completion, so this is getting everything perfect at the end. Certificate of occupancy, this is like years of my life have been spent centered around getting certificates of occupancy on time. Certificate of occupancy is the date that you have the permits necessary to move your students into the school. And move in, I mean, have your first open house, whatever. So beginning with the end in mind, what date do you have to move in order to start your school? There's going to be a temptation that I might even encourage you in to use commercial builders rather than school builders, because a lot of times school builders become so specialized that first they tell you what you want before you agree to it, and second they charge more and are less adaptive. The problem with commercial, however, is that they are not used to building to timelines. Oh, the dentist office is 2 months late, who really cares? What happens to your school when it opens in October?
You don't get funded.
Right. You literally don't get funded, your charter is yanked. And so we'll go into this in the contracts and how you can build this in, but you live for your certificate of occupancy. Everything reverts back off of what date are you gonna take occupancy of that school. You put it in the contracts, you put it in the timelines, you build it into everything. I've got to the point where I just resigned myself to giving bonuses based on it, and completion on time bonuses, and then liquidated damages clauses if they didn't hit it. So you would be having them pay for rental of a different place. So one of the facilities that are of my 11 was renovating a church to become a school for 2 months because everything was done wrong on the certificate of occupancy. You know, how much money went into that? A lot of money went into that, and a lot of time went into that. Don't do that. Okay. Can you click to the next? Construction financing. How many of you already have people talking to you about financing? Okay. Different sources of money. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah.
Go. Do you wanna, I mean, I can talk about it, or do you want to throw in 2 cents about?
You talk and I'll.
Just
Throw
nod
in.
where okay. Or when I get it wrong. There are different builder models. So there are combined architect, developer, builder. There are ones where, those are basically the 3 parts of it. You have an architect, you have a builder, and you have the person who comes with the money. Sometimes those 3 are together, sometimes various parts are separated off. I've built under all 3 different models, and there's pluses and minuses to each of them. Having them combined is really great for economies of scale. It's very effective. It's very short. The builder tells the architect what they want because they're sitting in the same office. They then tell you what you want, and because they control the money. And you know, dictatorships work better than democracies. I'm not saying that they don't, actually. You can frequently get a cheaper building that way. And if you can go that way and you can get what you want, okay. But make sure you know what those interconnected parts really are. Other models are you go out and get financing yourself. That's going to be really hard when you're a startup. When you're an expansion school, Providence High School was actually funded on a state credit enhancement pre-bonding, which is a very unique thing, and that was wonderful. But that only happens after you've been operating your school for a while. So when you're starting up, you're probably going to need to be dealing with somebody who is both bringing the money and probably building it or working closely with the builder. As much, however, as you can separate those 3 parts, do so. The architect is a key one to separate off if you have any design considerations, and it goes to a lot of the money stuff too. If you can at least have transparency between the financier and the builder so that you understand what the markups are, what the rates are. We're in a competitive enough environment now that you can ask questions like, what is the return on your investment as a developer? What money are you putting in? Will you show me the cost sheets on your construction so that, I'll give you some in the next class, but the actual budget of here's how much I'm spending on sheet rock, here's how much I'm spending on concrete, here's how much I'm spending on each of these line items, and here's what the markup is at the end. The perfect place is having a disclosed markup so you know both on the financing and on the building costs. And then having an architect cost that is totally independent of any of those things. District schools build where the architects get a percentage of the cost of the building. So what happens to the cost of the building when architects get a percentage? Right. So first thing I learned on building number 3 is separate off the architect. Make sure that you're getting the architectural design that you want, but they're designing it with the money in mind, and they aren't paid up or down based on that. No, actually go back, I'm sorry. Construction financing, if you go into a developer build, which is what many of you will probably do, you'll have an agreement where you go into it with the financiers, maybe the financier and a builder, to build a building to your specifications, and then you have a certain time to bond or mortgage it out, right? The bonding that I keep talking about. The considerations on what that is, how long you have to bond out, what terms you have to bond out. I've seen contracts that exist that were signed that were in operation where the increase rates were 10% per year. So think about it. If you can't bond out, and you need at least 3 years operating history now to get an S&P rating, which helps get the interest rates lower and stuff. So if you can't bond out on a good deal, and you're looking at 5 years, ouch. So you should generally be able to get them down in the 2.5% to 3% range. The last few that I did were down in that range. So shoot for that, but make sure that you have enough disclosed that they're not telling you 3%, and then there's other things front-loading it, so it's more than that. State credit enhancement options. I've talked a little bit about the state credit enhancement program, but we have this awesome thing here that is very, very, very difficult to get. State credit enhancement gives the full faith and credit of the Utah bond rating, the Utah credit rating to, charter schools. They really only give it to schools after they've got multiple years. We have to get a BBB minus S&P rating, which all just means that you're operating well, academics are good, finances are solid and good, but that's what you're heading towards. Now, most of the state credit enhancement deals are in the 3 to 5% interest rate range long term. Most of the bond market deal add 2 or 3 percentage points. If you're going open financing, it's almost loan shark kind of prices. That's where you get into the 10% kind of stuff. So you want to build economically, and you want to ensure that from the beginning you're going to comply with what the state credit enhancement program is going to want to see you have in the end, 3 years down the line, ideally 3 years. This is where the bonding part comes in. The 25%, I told you 25% is your cutoff. That's jump off a cliff, you're not going to get bonded. That's when you have to start going to the loan sharks. I've hinted at this. Can you click down a little bit? The partnering part of it. All right. How many of you guys got married after your first date? Okay. How many of you guys got married after dating a year? Okay, better, right? I come from BYU. I know the first date thing. It can work, but just generally, it's not the best way to go about it, right? So there are those within the biggest abuses that occur with school funding and public education money, I am convinced occur within the school construction arena. And if you look at people who have really made a lot of money on school construction, it's people who, or on schools, it's people who have financed school constructions. I wish we could give that money to teachers and hardworking administrators and heck, even board members who put years of their life into something they don't get paid for, right? Been there, done that. But what ends up happening is a lot of abuses occur here. So, what's the best way to eliminate abuses? around, right. Go to the dance, meet all the girls, right, Adam?
Check references.
Heck yeah.
What?
Check references.
Check references.
What other buildings have you built and go
Yes,
talk to them.
yes, thank you, exactly. I'm gonna touch on the legal here because you're going to get competing legal opinions on what the state procurement code says. I'm gonna try and give you the unbiased version of that. The procurement code, as it deals with charter school construction, what has to be RFP'd, request for proposal, which is a formal process of seeking proposals. What has to be RFP'd, what doesn't have to be RFP'd, at what point in time. I'm gonna give you my most limited version. You will hear other people tell you that I'm too restrictive on this interpretation. But my interpretation is that anything that you will eventually spend more than $100,000 on, you have to RFP out. That means business management services. And that's over the life of the time that they're going to be working for you. So if you're looking to partner up with a business manager, why not RFP it out? Financing and building, you might decide that you want to combine these two into one RFP. A lot of builders have better access to being able to obtain financing than you do. I've only done really one school where the financing wasn't somehow tied to the builder. And so you can do an RFP for that. You have to do an SOIQ separate, and an SOIQ is this legislative thing. Yes, I rolled my eyes on camera. Where you, don't edit. Where you have to select architects based on statements of interest and qualifications. So you select based on their qualifications, not based on price. So, which, okay, fine. It's actually the same process frequently used in selection of lawyers, so I shouldn't complain too much. But, I wouldn't hire a personal injury lawyer if I had a patent I wanted to prosecute, right? You want to make sure that you're getting the right thing. So you do want to check qualifications, but at the end of the day, if you know that one architect is going to be charging you literally 10 times more than another architect, you kind of want to know that earlier than later. So the SOIQ process, I'll start with that one. The SOIQ process is the architect RFP, and you are not allowed to ask price. Initially. You are allowed to ask them to provide price that you open after you determine their qualifications. So, is everybody following me on this? This gets really weird and
Can you say
convoluted.
that last sentence again?
Okay, so what you do, I'll walk you through Providence High School. So, this is where I get to building really detailed SOIQs and RFPs. So, my last ones are like mini books, because I want this many square footage, this much square footage going into classrooms, I want this in a lab, I want, all these things. So you put those out, architects, you'll put them out in several different ways on your website, public postings, BidSync is now required, I think that's the latest language, but it's just good anyway. The architects will then submit back, and they will submit their qualifications, and within those qualifications will be, here's how many architects we have on staff, here's how many people will be working on your project, things we've done in the past. One of the things that I like to ask is how many schools have you built, how many charter schools have you built, and then I always ask references. I want 5 references, but I also want the last 5 projects you've done because I'm really going to go check references that you didn't give me. This is where that B word comes in again, but it's awesome because that's when you get the real references, right? But you determine based on qualifications, so back to the process, and what you do at that point is, okay, so this architect builds modern designs, great. This architect builds classical designs, and they're going to try and talk me into something that I want that's different, or I want a lead school. Have you ever done a lead school? Lead schools are really hard, I don't recommend it, but if you want it, then, you want to go for what you're looking for. You also want somebody who is likely going to come in relatively okay on price. Other considerations are the how many people part of it. Are they going to show up to the construction site meeting each week or not? What happens when you are dealing with construction and you suddenly realize, oh crap, we have a problem with whatever. Oh, wait, right there. Why do we not have the electrical going through the cinder block instead of outside? Did nobody plumb the holes for that? Wait, what just happened here? And you've got an electrician standing on a ladder, holding the cables going. There's no place for me to put these. I'm gonna have to jerry-rig an outside solution to that. That's where an architect comes in and you say, did you build that into the architectural plans? And they said, yes, I did actually. Okay, then you turn to the builder and say, then why haven't you built it that way? But the builder says, wait, it's not in the plans, then you have to turn back to the architect and say, what's your fix? So RFI, request for information is issued at that point, and you get the architect to answer. So whether or not they're involved in the process, or whether or not they're handing you a set of plans that has literally been built 7 times, and yes, that's occurred here, those are things that you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to know who you're going to be working with. So as part of the SOIQ process, you can select your favorite. So there were 11 bidders on Providence High School. We selected the top 3 and had them come in for interviews with the board and the staff to kind of get a sense of, do we want to work with these people or not, which is awesome to do. And it's a fun moment of getting to like put that spotlight on somebody and see how they really react. Well, one of them, 2 of them were really quite good. One of them built beautiful things, but came in, this was the first charter school they had ever applied to build and design as an architect. And they actually came in with a list of, these are the things you can't have in a school because you can't afford it. Because I had actually stated this is our square foot cost and all that up front. And so they gave me a full, great big poster board list of, these are all the things you can't have. And I'm like, dude, look at my resume. This is school number 11. I know I can have all of those things. Why are you telling me I can't? And then so I pushed back in the interview, and it became very quickly a don't worry your pretty little head about it kind of scenario, right? And so this is why you interview them. This is why you shine the spotlight. And this is why you ask all the hard questions up front instead of after the marriage. How many kids do you have? Those kinds of things you ask before you get married, right? It's the same kind of thing. How many enemies do you have? Have you ever had a building fall down? Yes.
Are you available to come to those interviews?
Sure.
With us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. You're actually required to have a construction expert as part of the interviews. It's somewhere in the code, and I'll find it if you want to. But I would be happy to consult on that and do that for very cheap because picking your partners is big. The builder thing you could be a little bit more transparent on. This is another one where you'll be told that you don't necessarily have to go through an RFP process. This one I'll throw down a law license on. I think you do have to go through an RFP process. I don't think there's any wiggle room to get out of that on a builder financer. Yeah.
Sorry, can I back you up one step?
Sure.
When you were talking about the SOIQ, and you talked about doing the interview and everything, you said there was a way to get a price, but then
Yes.
you didn't.
You're right.
So I'm wondering if I missed it, or if
What's your name
something you
again?
brought up in the interview. Emily.
Impressive attention to detail. I missed a step. Thank you very much. So you stack rank them. You take in the top interviews, and then you stack rank those. And in this interview, I think we actually put one below somebody we didn't even interview. But we had a stack ranking at that point. At that point, you can open the price of the first one.
Right.
Just the first one. And then you can say, is this a price we're willing to accept or not? And then you can go into one round of price negotiations and say, this is not an acceptable price, I need your best and final offer. And then they'll give you their best and final offer. If that is not consistent with what you need, you go to the next one. You cannot go back to the first one. And you go down the line. So it's weird, right? I know architects lobby much. Anyway, it's very unique in how you do it. There are pluses, though, to architects become very concerned with qualifications and doing things right. So that's the plus of it. But yeah, it's a weird way to do things. So be careful with that process. By the way, one other thing I'm going to volunteer on is reviewing SOIQs prior to you guys sending them out. I'll bring some of the ones that I've done over the years with the details of what you want in the buildings. Okay, RFPs. This is where it gets down and dirty. the builders and the builder financiers. This is again where ask for everything up front. You know, just to continue my ridiculous analogy, go for the supermodel. When she turns you down, you know, whatever.
The next supermodel.
What?
Then go for the
Then
next.
go for the next supermodel. When you get tired, then go for, you know, I'm gonna stop with that analogy officially right now, but ask all the hard questions up front. Ask for everything that you think you can get. If you get the, oh, that's ridiculous, you can't have it, call somebody who knows, call me. The references is a really key one, kind of like I was saying on the architect thing. Don't just get the names of the people that they want you to call. Get the names of the schools and then track down board members. Change orders. The worst contractors and subs are those who will low bid a project with the intention of change ordering you up to the price that they really need to get. So writing in your contract, this is how change orders will be completed, this is who has to sign off on them, here's how much you'll be able to upcharge on a change order, is something that should be in your contract. And by the way, anything that you want in your contract should be in your RFP. It took me like 4 schools to learn that. So if you upfront say, these are going through the terms that we are going to request from you, change orders no more than 5 to 10% markup, must have notice, must have sign off. So one of my horror stories was, I shouldn't say the school, but it needed to have a full federal school lunch program, which means you need to cook meat, which means you need to have a grease trap, or you can't cook meat. Detail, right? So I'm on site going, wait, there's supposed to be a grease trap, I don't see the hole in the ground. And the grease trap is the part where the water comes out before it hits the sewer, right? Or the water outlet, whatever. Oh, yeah, you just want a warming kitchen, that's fine, don't worry about it. But we're gonna give you $3,000 for that. So for the next 30 years, I don't get to have a full federal school lunch kitchen, I don't get to be able to provide free lunch, free and reduced lunch to students, I don't get to be able to provide a healthy lunch to students.
I would say 2,000.
May I please have my $3,000 back? The change order process can help you with some of those things. Nothing changes unless it goes through a change order. Okay? It also slows down the project, and a bad builder, or even one who you're just not getting along with, you have to maintain that relationship, will not be overly forthcoming. So it's something you really need to stay on top of. Yes?
I will say too, you have to be really careful, and I mean, it's almost like the chicken and the egg thing. You have to be really careful at the very beginning knowing what you want, because they don't see things sometimes. You know,
Right.
like they put a warming kitchen in mine, and we're just kind of going over the plans at the end, you know, and I'm like, wait a minute, what'd you say?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, did you read my charter? You know, because it's a full kitchen.
No, they didn't read
And
a
they
charter,
didn't read
ever.
it.
No one has.
And they say they do, but they don't.
They've never read
Because
a
it's
charter.
long, right? No one's gonna read that thing. And so I'm like, no, you know, it's in my charter. And they said they read my charter, so they had to take care of the problem
Is it in a
and
contract?
put, yes, so they had to put that whole fix-it on their dime because, you know,
So did you use as an addendum to your building
it was
contract, your
before,
charter?
it was before I signed off on any of that stuff, you know, so
Okay.
we were lucky. But that was my point.
Yeah.
Way early on, you have to know these little weird things that you
Right.
want, right?
Right, okay, so a little weird thing.
And even like I said, I want showers. I want some showers in case we have stinky kids, you know, in
When you're in
case we have.
K-12, you do.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, and they
But they won't
fought
shower
me
in
on that, and I'm
anyway.
like, they need those just in case, you know, if they wanna ride their bikes to school or whatever, or you have a kid who is homeless, right? We have a lot of
Yeah.
low income out there, so, you know, and they weren't gonna put that in at all, and I said, it has to be put in, you know, so you have to know those things way in advance.
Wallace Stegner, do you need a warming kitchen or a full federal school lunch kitchen?
I just wrote this down actually, because I think that we kind of had a warming kitchen in our budget.
That's what, yeah.
We're, our.
And it's a huge amount of money difference,
We're
like,
like-
huge.
Is that required for a federal school lunch?
Yes.
You can run a federal school lunch program without with a
But you
working
can't do
kitchen, but
meat
it's
and stuff.
really hard.
But you can't do what, what do you say?
You can't do meats. Everything's cold cuts, all day long, cold cuts.
It's fine.
Well, let's talk.
Interesting, okay.
But these are things to think about. Now, running a full federal school lunch program is awesome. So Providence Hall, we were able to pay for all of the staff. About 20% of the students were on free and reduced lunch. So we're paying free and reduced lunch, minimal cost to students, and on-site. And there's a lot of advantages to it. It's hard to run. But we were running it as a surplus, which you're not legally allowed to do. And I know that, which is why we put kitchen and janitorial staff who took care of the kitchen, which would otherwise have to have been taken care of janitorial staff. Am I still legal, Danny? Okay. But it's a good thing to have. Anyway, small item. Okay. Working relationships. When you go around and you're touring these other buildings, okay, who was your building officer? Who was the closest contact? Who did you negotiate the contract with? Find these things out. Ask the really hard questions. Can you click to the next? So the contract, and this is the stuff I was saying, put in the RFP. Here's what I want. Stupid analogy, I can't seem to stop, but here's what you put on your dating website, right, before you put something out there. The lease options, so how long are you allowed to be on your lease before you have to purchase it? What are the interest rate increases? Pre-negotiated purchase option. This one should go without saying. How much do I get to buy the school for when it's time for me to buy the school for? But there's history from multiple builder developers. I'm not quite giving you that price, and it looks like you've got a price, but then it's subject to various changes later, and then things happen, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we're not actually going to give you your certificate of occupancy unless you agree to this additional $1 million, quote unquote, to me. And you're sitting at July whatever, and you have to open, and what do you do?
Do you have to like call the mafia or something?
I know a guy. That's another conversation. No, it's really, you call the lawyer. I mean, that's when all conversations start to be recorded. That's when you ultimately, in the instance in which I was involved, we gave that much just because we had no choice, but it wasn't this much, and that's what I called a win at the end of the day. But watching 8 teacher salaries walk out the door on a blackmail option? Kurt. Yeah, Jalen.
I was gonna say, sometimes some of the more, anyway, some developers will pick off what they perceive as weak board members.
Yeah.
I remember
Go. Please.
I had been on my board for a month, so pretty brand new, and I was walking through the building with the developer and the contractor, and the developer was very aware that he was not going to make his deadlines. There was no way he could finish the building in time, and we had a lot built into our contract of how much he would have to pay us for every day he was late. And it was very much there, and so he needed that changed. So he figured he could pick off the weak board member and have me sign a new contract there. And really tried on multiple attempts throughout the meeting, and I finally just said, fine, we'll walk away, we have nothing to lose. I cannot sign this contract until we've met as a board and the board votes on it. But had he got
She's legally right on that.
Had he got my signature on that document, it would have changed the outcome of the school.
Yeah.
It really.
That would have been a hard thing for a lawyer to then sort through, is did you have the ability to give that?
Did I not? But he very much that day tried to pick me off as a board member that didn't know anything.
Right.
I think if I remember right, I had my 1-year-old on my backpack. He really was trying to pin me as a mom that didn't know anything.
He doesn't know that you read state code for fun.
And that's when I didn't. And that's when I didn't read state code. I was really
Started to really
just.
work.
But they very much intended and no one person can renegotiate things.
Right. Well said, and I have seen that same scenario play out multiple times, both on the initial contract change orders and purchase options. The purchase option thing is an old game, but I'm afraid it's coming back now. And so I just want to warn you about it before it becomes a new game. So just from here's what I wanted to do with my life in the world thing, I became involved in building some of these schools because I was seeing so much abuse, and it seemed like it got better for a while, but I'm now starting to see some of the same bad things that I was seeing in 2007, 2008, around that area, plus or minus a few years, coming back now, and that's one of them, which is these fungible change orders and the end date moving and well, here's how much we're gonna sell the building to you for. Anytime they say prime rate, that makes me a little nervous. It just becomes random numbers they're making up sometimes. But one other thing, incorporating the architectural plans and specifications. Do you have that set of plans?
I'll go get it.
Yeah. We can
We'll
look
get
at
it
it later, but there's big old set of plans that are done. You can be working with a developer and a builder to get the contract done at the same time that you're developing the plans, but at some point, integrate as an addendum the final set of the plans so that you can go back and say, no, it's not only in the plans, it's in the contract in the plans. So, this one, again, should go without saying, no personal guarantees. Unfortunately, I've seen this both in Utah and a lot outside. I'm aware of a situation in Colorado where a couple who were trying to start a charter school mortgaged their house, lost their house, because they were told that they had to personally guarantee the school. Never, ever, 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 ever sign the personal guarantee. Flip side of that is, they want to know that you have something in the game, and they want to know that you aren't going to flake out on them. So they are going to legitimately ask you, okay, this is a partnership now. How do we know that you're not going to run a bad school and therefore not be able to bond, and therefore we're not going to be able to get our money back? It's your job to be a good school. So it's not all dating. I can't stop with this analogy, but it's two-sided, right? It has to be fair on both sides. And so they should be asking, if they're serious and they really want to know, are we partnering with a good school? The best of them will say, can you give us a little bit of background on you? They will have read your charter, or at least enough of it that they can fake it. They will know enough about you. They will know if you have a finance person on the board. They will know if you have a lawyer on the board. They will know if you have these people who are going to make a good school. Now, to somebody who's going to take advantage of you, they're not going to want those people with the school. They're going to be the board members.
Yeah, they're gonna want to look to the moms or.
Right. I actually had one say, we want this board member to be our building officer. And really, that's what you want, huh? And then, you know, she already had the color samples in her hands and the paint swatches and the fabric and all that. And that's what she perceived her whole job to be, was picking the color of the paint, picking the carpet from the 3 options. And at that point, you've lost, right? So please don't have signed a contract by then. But these are things to look out for. They're going to want somebody smart who at least is going to be good to work with and is going to be professional. Okay, cancellation terms. Now, this isn't just liquidated damages at the end if they don't deliver on time. It's cancellation if they don't deliver on other things. Like, for instance, bond financing, or not bond financing, I just throw bond in front of everything these days. Financing, original financing. You can go into something with a developer/builder, but they still have to go out and get the money from somewhere else. And so they might be staking collateral or whatever they're doing to get the financing. But you may have entered into a contract with them without them having yet obtained financing. And this is common. So I don't want to say never do that scenario. But include in the contract an out clause. If you do not have the financing to begin construction by X date, means then we can get out of that. Make X date far enough that you can go to your next builder option. So, so you can get out of whatever you need to get out of in time to recover. And there will always be something that you're going to need to recover from. And then this is the liquidated liquidated damages clause. Okay, so for every day that you are late on delivering this building, it's this amount. And if you're early, it's this amount. Generally, it's not that much for being early because you can't afford it. But the late part, what I'll frequently do is, okay, it's $1,000 a day for, these 3 days. Then it's $5,000. Then it's $10,000. And that ties back, to be legally enforceable, it kind of has to tie back to something. And what it has to tie back to is alternative facilities. And so here's how much it would cost us to bring in portables. We're building in liquidated damages. By this date, we would know that we would need to sign a contract to get those portables. So that's how you build in liquidated damages. Again, talk to me when you need me about that, but that's, you want those things in there. Yeah.
And think about them ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
Because the school I was at, we didn't think about that. We had liquidated damages in there, but we didn't have in our brains a good alternative plan. And we're driving around, I remember on August 20th, looking for an alternative location to start school. And just
You
going
were all
to
having the
place-
proper reaction.
and ended up in a facility that had basketball courts where we put shower curtains up and set the whole school up every morning and took it down every night in a 15-minute window. And we did that for 2.5 months. So have a good plan in place well ahead. Don't think you're not going to need it. Have the plan.
Yeah.
Because it was very stressful. I don't remember eating or sleeping for quite a while.
Great.
Somehow I did gain a lot of weight during that time.
A lot of schools will have examples like this. That's where you go to the very detailed mapping of your schedule, your construction schedule, your architectural design schedule, and I'll go over that next time. But also have the contingency plan schedule. So by April, do you know where your portables are going to be coming from if you're not on schedule? And how far off schedule do you need to be looking for portables or alternate locations? Is there a church around here we could adapt really quickly? But at what point do you need to look for those things? Can you click on the next one?
What's the average building construction time? I mean, like a year, 2 years, a year and a half, 9 months?
It depends. It depends on a lot of things. So a district school, it's usually 2 years plus. My record was that Providence Junior High with the columns, 5 months 1 week and 5 years off my life. It was awful. I think it's a record. I don't ever encourage anybody ever meeting that record again. I mean, we killed ourselves to meet that. What happened on that, cautionary tale. What happened on that was we got approved for an expansion to build a junior high. The Board of Education finally stamped it in October. Okay, you can go forward, and you couldn't go forward. You can't enter into the contracts prior to that piece of paper. Financing didn't come through right the first time. It had to go to second builder developer option. That didn't come through nearly on the time frame. Beginning of construction, March. And the whole time, luckily I built a few things by this point, but the whole time I'm looking at this construction calendar going, can this even be done? At one point at the end, we had 75 workmen in the building at once, literally just on top of each other, ladders and everything to finish. Don't do that.
No, we're not.
And honestly, if I hadn't had like the best construction superintendent I've ever met on that job, it wouldn't have happened. A 9-month time frame is reasonable. It's still going to be hard. You're still going to want to push all the time on everything, but it's reasonable. If anybody up front tells you 5 months is fine, yeah, okay. Even modification of an existing building, sometimes that can be a lot longer than you think because you're going to different occupancy levels. So pop quiz, what occupancy permit level do you need to have on a school? Good, E occupancy. What are commercial buildings? B or C. What is the only occupancy level that is harder than an E? Institutional hospitals. Just showing off with that one, sorry. You need a lot for an E-occupancy building. It has its own distinct structural requirements, so if you're converting a business into a school, you are probably going to have to do structural upgrades. That means new shear walls, that means concrete, that means new foundations sometimes. It means almost always a new fire line. It means, egress, parking lot in and out, and, yes,
So
traffic plans.
with the E-permit, that goes for if you're building a building. What if you're temporarily using another building until you have your building built? Does it still have to meet the E-permit?
Remember that church I used?
Mhm.
It was up on structural. It was good on electrical. What it lacked was a fire line. It wasn't a sprinkled building. So this is where you get to the fun story part. So I had to hire a 24/7 fireman with a walkie-talkie and a cell phone to walk the building for 2 months to look for fire. And it was worth it. It's called a fire watch, but
It's cheaper than
This
it's-
paying
Just put it in
$80,000 to
Yeah.
put a sprinkling system in our middle school portable building,
right,
which is what we had to do.
right.
Well, it's good to know there's an option. Do you have to wear his hat and stuff?
We're going back to Dumb and Dumber. You mean there's a chance? I mean, you don't, this is progressive.
I mean, if they didn't shut you down altogether.
Oh,
Okay,
that
fine.
one was like hours of negotiating with the fire marshal who kept saying no, and finally I read enough code like Joy Lynn does to go, there's a fire watch thing.
Oh,
Yeah, we utilized that too,
Yeah, have you? Where'd you do that?
at Lakeview.
Okay.
We were so after we did shower curtains for 2.5 months, we were able to get into half of our building, but the fire line wasn't all the way hooked up, so we did.
We'll make it mine.
The fireman was walkie-talkie.
Or we also, yeah, I think we were also allowed to use a police officer,
Uh-huh.
so, but yeah,
Firemen are cheaper, by the way.
yes, they are.
They, yeah, little tidbits you pick up along the way. Okay, so, lease purchase, school finance, the charter management organization, let me just say something cautionary on this. Charter management organization can be a great option, but it can also tie you to things that you can't get out of. So, it's kind of like check the in-laws too, you know, if you have somebody, I know, I can't stop with this analogy, it's just so useful. But, so if you have somebody who has been a charter management organization, there are several in Utah. I'm not saying thumbs up or thumbs down on any of them, but different ones of them provide different services based on different things. You can have a full charter management organization. They are going to everything from write your charter to run the school. You just come to board meetings, we'll build your school, we'll design your school, and it'll be great. Guess what? It might actually be quite great that way, but is that a level of control you're willing to give up? Or do you want to go with maybe the same group, but just have them do this and this? One strong suggestion is any contract that you sign have out clauses. In case this goes bad, have a prenup. I can't stop. So make sure that you can get out of whatever you're entering into. The CMO thing can be quite daunting and quite scary if you are tied in with everything to one group and things go sour. Does anybody want to share? No?
I can say what our out clause is.
Please.
Is that either party, either the school or the CMO can get out of the contract with 30 days notice, I believe, isn't that? Yeah.
And that's on a business management service?
Yes.
Okay, it wasn't, and building and the architecture and
No,
the.
but I'm just saying that
It's a great out clause.
that's a good out clause.
And that's always what I went for too, mutual.
I just figured it could carry into the bigger.
Yeah,
all
except
controlling
when you're going into building a school, you can get a lot more locked in, and you might actually need to. Okay, transparency. It's the goal. Work for it. Try and understand how much is really going to each of these things. And when you're looking at CMOs for things like business management services, call and ask around. How much do you pay your business manager? Is it a CMO? Do you have an in-house business manager that you have trained and developed yourself? How much do you pay, what services do they provide? There are some times where it's good to go with a CMO, there's some times where it's good to outsource yourself. Tech is another one. Well, everything. There's a lot of services that can be provided. If you're going to lump all these things in together, make sure that they can be bifurcated. Get points for that word, right? Make sure that they can be bifurcated, or that there's some out clause for parts or all of them. That being said, you also have to be attractive enough for them to want to come with you. And if you're building all these out clauses into it, they might say, you're not going to be worth it, and we're not going to do this. And so there is this back and forth that, but that's where you go to asking people who've been there, done that, and they can say, yeah, that's kind of an industry standard thing, or no, please don't do that, and you're going to spend years regretting it. Okay, if you don't mind. Okay, location, I have to touch on this because this is another thing I'm starting to see repeated. So developers would sometimes say, we will build you this size of a building to these architectural plans with these materials, they didn't even get that detailed, sign with us. Okay, where are you going to put the building? It was somehow silent and everything. And suddenly, you're trying to attract students to a school that's literally 10 miles from the nearest subdivision. Really? Really? How does that really work? Now, Mill Creek, bless your hearts, you guys are going to be paying through the nose for your land, but you've got a lot of kids around you. So that's awesome, right? You can have walkers, you can have less space spent on parking and on drive-through, because you'll actually be able to have a walking. Are you a 2-mile radius school?
No.
Oh, okay. Something to factor in. Are there going to be a lot of kids who are going to be able to walk here? Is there going to be easy access? Are you on a corridor artery? So the one in Erta, the Tooele one that with lovely green backyard, it was far away from subdivisions, but it's on the way out of Tooele. So there's Tooele, and then there's the freeway, and here's the school. And so parents would pick up and drop off pretty easily. And so it wasn't the worst location for that. And again, the land was cheap, if not for the sewer. Road infrastructure. Oh, yeah, utilities, we covered that. Road infrastructure. Municipalities will try and get you to widen roads. They will try and get you to put in sidewalks. They will try and get you to do a lot of these things. Sometimes it comes down to a negotiation. They shouldn't be allowed to ask you to do these things, but sometimes you kind of start to negotiate a little bit on some of these things. So you want to go to places where the roads are already there, and you're not dependent upon the city putting in a 4-lane road where there's currently a dirt road that they don't really want to pave, because guess what? You're going to be paving that because you have to. Also, surrounding infrastructure. Do you have a lot of means for people to come from multiple directions? One of the hard things with Providence is we ended up with 2,000 kids on one really small hill and in 3 different buildings, and getting 2,000 kids there and 2,000 kids off that hill each day is a very unique traffic plan, I'll just say that. But it's hard. If we had spread things out, or if we had had multiple arteries to pull from, that would have been better. One interesting thing that happened on Providence is the Mountain View Corridor came in, and we had been working closely enough with the city council members that we knew that the Mountain View Corridor was going to come in. So even though there wasn't an existing road at the time, there was going to be one about the time we opened. Voila, so we now have multiple arteries. You can get that information if you have a good relationship with the city. Size of the building, the bigger the better, but to a point. So you don't want a palace, remember the 20% thing, but you do want, Adam? Classrooms and bathrooms, right? So, right. The number of bathrooms, one without the other not so good, but classrooms are really key. You need more classrooms than you think you do every single time. And how many of you have ever constructed a master schedule for a junior high? Ha, Joylyn, what can you tell us about classrooms and moving around in the master schedule in a junior high?
Sticky notes are your best friend.
Right. Do you need a few classes to be empty sometimes.
Yeah, and if you think that every class is just gonna be a perfect 25,
Right.
it's not. You're gonna have some classes that are 20 or 19 or,
What's your surplus number of classes that you would ballpark,
I like 2.
percentage?
We had I can't do math this late at night.
Oh, okay.
But we had 75 kids in the grade, and I always wanted 2 extra classrooms, so.
Okay. That's probably more than I would ask for, but make sure that you do, yes.
This was not the original library for the school. The original library was on the main floor. It was converted into breakout rooms. And the library was moved up
Or
into
ability
this
briefing, if you
multi-purpose
guys wanna see those.
area.
Great, good, thank you, perfect example. Classrooms are always at a premium. Yes,
And when you're building, you want 4 or 5 more than you think you need.
yeah, yeah.
And you'll use them and you'll fill them.
Yeah, you really will. It's like closet space. Oh, closet space, you also want that. Storage space.
Office space is
Yeah.
one you always think, well, I need an office for my director, and we can get by with just that.
No, you need more office space. So on the high school, I put in 8 offices thinking that would be enough. I don't think it was. But you always need more office space. You always need more storage space. Sometimes office space can become storage space, and storage space can become office space. Or a kiln room, if necessary. But boxes, you do need those. And even when you're going open and you think that you really want to have things open, you really are going to need some boxes with which to have a teacher teach kids. Excavation cost, I kind of covered that. Some land is just horrible. Harriman had its trade-offs, but man, that dirt under there, we had boulders, 7-foot boulders that we were pulling out. Again, this is excavating with dynamite, right? And so those things really factor in. If you run into an excavation issue, call me, because I've lived some of them now. And sometimes there's ways, bringing in dirt as opposed to digging down can sometimes be cheaper. Doing interesting civil designs where you have a staggered building base. So, one bank of classrooms on one side is lower than the other, and then you make it look like it's not. Those are things that can be done. And then political factors I've touched on. Are you supported in the community? Do they want you there? Fun story I'll tell quickly is Providence Hall was started originally to go into Bluffdale. Bluffdale, very fundamentalist population, very agrarian climate. We went there, and in our groundbreaking, they had started to circle around. They really hated us. There had been some open houses. I had a city councilman spit in my face. And getting the idea that they don't like you when they show up with bullhorns and things. But we went forward with the groundbreaking because we're tough, strong people who really just want to help the kids, right? So groundbreaking comes, and they all get their ATVs, and they surround us, and they bring out their kids, and they have RVs and ATVs, and they're just circling us the whole time. And the press comes. All 3 channels came out with their cameras at that point. So, make sure your hair looks good on a day like this, right? No, it was our best thing. So they bring out more people, like, okay, call the neighbors, the press is here, this is gonna be awesome. And some of the signs were things like, well, I enjoyed the Bible verses, that was nice. I couldn't quite figure out how they actually applied in any of those situations they used, but then, you want to kill our kids. That was a big poster right behind where we had our little podium set up. And the premise of their argument was because there weren't sidewalks there and we hadn't stipulated to pay for the sidewalks to go in there, that their kids who routinely walk on the dirt, we would just hit with our cars. Because we don't care about kids, because we're just building a school, right? It got insane. And we ultimately, so we very quickly, I am on the other board members, very quickly sent our kids home. Okay, honey, please take the kids home. We've got to finish this thing, but it doesn't appear really safe at this point. And then there was a small group of us, 5 or 6, I think, that we had to call the police, and the police had to come get us off the property because they were still circling us. But it was awesome on TV, and you know what happened? We went from 100 student enrollment to like 800 overnight. By overnight, I mean I mean, it was fast because we suddenly got all this great press and I went home crying thinking this is, well, not actually crying because I don't frequently, but really this is the end of the school, this is awful, this can't be happening. And suddenly the enrollment numbers are booming, this is awesome. Best part, Harriman, which is right next to Bluffdale and has been having this interlocal fight for years, calls us and says, we have some land. We have several different pieces of land. Can we help you negotiate for a prime piece of land on a hill overlooking the valley with beautiful views of everything? Couldn't have been happier to be there. The value of having a good community. Their enemies were our enemies, and we made really good friends. Okay, I'm going to go through the next ones really quickly, and I'm sorry to be taking so long. This is what a building officer does. The school will designate a building officer, and this is the person on the board and with the state who is tasked with making sure everything gets submitted right, gets done right. This is what I've sometimes done on, a contract basis. I'm not saying that you need somebody like that, though. I mean, I did it first as a mom. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, and please have your little 2-year-old get off the site. You can do it. You have a wonderful maintenance manager. What is she?
School nurse / health teacher / building supervisor.
Who I had detailed conversations with about building material, cleaning supplies. She knew her stuff. She could be a building
And
officer,
then
no
she
problem.
hired a general contractor
Right,
for our repairs.
right. But no, I did pretty well, and I started off with really not a lot of experience, but a whole lot of, I'm going to ask questions and I'm not going to be scared of you. So it doesn't need to be a professional to do this. You can do this, but know what you're in for. So here's what you're in for. You represent the board's interests. If anyone, CMO, anyone says, don't worry, we can do this for you, say, no, thank you, I'm moving on now. This needs to be a person who reports directly to the board and who is tasked with reporting to the board and representing the board's interests separate from their own. Frequently back in the good old days, they would have somebody who was the CMO, who was the building officer, who was also on their staff or was with their architect's office. No, never. Always must remain independent, or else what negotiation do you have? They also need to thoroughly understand the goals of the board and the builders, architects, keep those relationships going. But this goes back to the planning part, and I want you guys to all start doing a little bit more planning. What is it that we really need? Because a building officer, even if it's one of you guys who maybe wrote the charter, if you don't know what you need, how are you going to make sure you get it? Can you click to the next one?
And just jump in another.
Yeah.
The school I'm at, Lakeview Academy, I sit on the board there. It's a science, arts, and technology school. So one thing that would be really important to a science, arts, and technology school is the kiln. But in the architect drawings, it became an electronic outlet panel room. So make sure that.
They forgot about it in the first drawings, so.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, I don't know.
And I'm standing in this room one day going, this is where the kiln is. How are we doing that with all of these panels in here? So just make sure you're.
Fast forward, no kiln?
No kiln. We have no
Okay.
kiln. We have no. To this day, 10 years later, no kiln.
Right. She has a kiln.
We have a kiln.
I had a kiln at junior high. There's hard things on kilns. We'll talk about that later. But getting your permit is its own process, and we'll go through this a little bit more. But there's a pre-construction checklist of the things that you need to supply, which are completed architectural plans, engineered, structural, electrical, mechanical, fire, something else I'm forgetting. All of those need to be done. A SWIP plan, which is your stormwater retention plan. Things that you don't even know exist, you're going to have completed plans signed off by engineers to be able to submit to get your checklist. During construction, you prior to the start of construction, you do an SP 4 and 5, and that details things that go into the planning process. So what percentage of your school or what square footage is going to go to classrooms, bathrooms, all of the things, and there's a list of like 25 things. SP 8s, that's what you, as a board, your building officer, the person who represents you, is filling out each month to assess project progression. And it's really an important document. I don't know if anybody ever reads them. In fact, I sometimes wonder if they really don't. but it's important for you, because that's when you're going through each of the inspections, you're going through everything that's happened, you're detailing out what's happened, and it's your chance to say, I have to fill out this SB 8, I need all of the inspection forms from everyone, and sometimes it'll be like 20, 25 forms in a month. That's how you find out what's really happening on your school. SP 9 and 10, that's all your final reports, everybody's signing off. Fire marshal is a really hard one, but the ultimate one is the certificate of occupancy from whoever your permitting entity is. It can be the USOE, it can also be a local municipality if you have a really good relationship with them, but it usually comes at a cost from that. Click. Other things to do, attend trainings, risk management trainings. This is covering a lot of those things that didn't used to happen. So hopefully you're getting a fair amount from this and you could move on. But when they have risk management training that goes to procurement code or something like that, go to that. Coordinate with those who are overseeing. Overshare means trust. What? Did I screw something up?
No,
No,
you're doing awesome.
Oh, well, okay, I spelled something wrong and I know it. Can you flick to the next slide before everybody catches it? Okay. Coordinate with the city, county, fire, and police on safety planning, traffic planning, emergency responsive planning. Traffic planning, you will probably need to get a traffic plan. I've done a lot of those designs too. You can get them from professional sources. The city may require you to get them from professional sources. The fire department and the police department can have some say-so. They really, it goes back to permitted use. They really can't say no. They're on the list of people who can't say no, but man, they can sure make life hard for you. So make sure that you are coordinated with them for how you're going to evacuate the school, how you're going to get this is a real thing, how you're going to get the fire truck that the city owns, the largest fire truck that the city owns, through your parking lot on a 180-degree radius, should there be a fire in your building. That's a real thing. So you have to coordinate with them. Does your fire truck have a tiller? Okay, we now need to make the concrete or the asphalt that much thicker. These are silly things, but again, coordinate up front. Emergency responsiveness planning. How are you going to get kids out of the school? Lockdown, fire, off-site drop-off in the case of some big catastrophe. Those are things that are good to plan early on in the process. Coordinate with your community for off-site locations. And then the going through it, this is more into the next meeting, but how you conduct the weekly meetings. They'll want to conduct them, and that's fine, but then just have your list of these are the things that I need each week to know. Monitor progress, educate yourself, like the woman whose name I forgot, Michelle. She just self-educated. Joy Lynn just self-educated. I just self-educated. But make sure that you're self-educating and you're really doing the research and you're reading those inspection reports. And monitor. And then update the board. The other part, too, is even if you are a member of the board, you need to be providing those updates to them so that they don't get to the end and have the, wait, you did what? Moment, or if a change order is needed, they can know ahead of time, hey, this is a possibility that may be coming, or we have the opportunity to do this. On the high school, it was add a second parking lot. We figured out how to redo the civil design in such a way that we could add a second parking lot for faculty parking, and we were so squished on parking, I went to the board saying, I think we can do this, I think we can do this, I think we can, and then at the end, when we realized we could, they were prepared to sign off on a really big change order for the sake of this second parking lot. If that communication had not taken place, there wouldn't be a second parking lot. Ask around other schools, selection of materials, design, etc. Miscellaneous, get your 501c, who has a 501c3 already? Okay, 2 win. Okay, 501c3 means you are a nonprofit, which means that you are now tax-free. Good practice early on to get a 501c3 so that you can start buying stuff, everything from lunch tables to whatever else. Speak with independent financial advisors. I recommend, there's 3 financial advisors that are legally approved to speak to state credit enhancement. It's not a bad idea to talk to them early on and say, what do I need to be looking at in 3 years? and they'll want to build a future client, so they'll talk to you.
They're all-
We are out of time, and I'm sorry, I will very happily take anybody who wants to stick around for a few minutes through this